In my last video, we created a small closed ecosystem using water I found inside a 1,200-year-old tomb, but this time I decided to take the experiment to a whole new level and built a miniature marine world packed with strange and fascinating creatures that I had never seen before in my life. I kept this jar completely sealed for 3 months, leaving small organisms and predators to live together without any disturbance the entire time. To make this happen, I first had to travel to the coast, getting as far away from the city as possible, anxious to see what strange beings I would end up finding. I walked for quite a while until I reached the most isolated area, and luckily the tide was low, which made it easy to step directly over the rocks. The ocean floor is practically another planet, a world governed by its own rules. I gathered some substrate and small submerged rocks to design the base of this marine ecosystem, since among them there usually live beings that we are unable to see with the naked eye. As a second step, I introduced algae and marine vegetation. This element is crucial, as it is responsible for generating the necessary oxygen to sustain life inside the jar indefinitely. It's fascinating how much is unveiled when the tide retreats. Finally, I collected a final water sample and headed back home, eager to discover what mysteries my collection was hiding. The following day, marking the very first official day of observation, the sand in the jar had settled and I could clearly observe the bottom. Those larger creatures that had gone completely unnoticed because the water was so murky when I gathered them finally revealed themselves for the first time. This creature, looking like something straight out of another world, is a strawberry anemone. It moves at such a ridiculously slow pace that I actually doubted whether it was even alive. However, I left my camera recording for several hours and later sped up the footage into a time lapse, and the final result completely blew my mind. It uses its tentacles to catch tiny passing prey and drifting nutrients, pulling them right into its center to feed. But the real surprise came shortly after, as much smaller creatures began to emerge, prowling through every corner of the jar. There were several tiny snails exploring their new environment, some of them so incredibly small they seemed practically microscopic. Shortly after, the jar began to fill with unexpected life, as other creatures started to emerge. Hermit crabs added lots of activity and movement to the jar, and interestingly, they got along remarkably well with the tiny snails we saw earlier. What few people know about hermit crabs is that they possess a curious superpower, a sense of smell so ultra-sensitive that it allows them to detect the exact chemical gases released when a snail vacates its shell, letting them rush over immediately to claim their new home. It felt like they wanted to stick together at all times, forming a tight-knit community of hermit crabs and tiny snails. In fact, the little snails were so bold they would even climb all over the hermit crabs, becoming quite a nuisance at times. Watching this tiny ecosystem come to life inside the jar is truly incredible. It's fascinating to think that a whole self-sustaining world is working perfectly in such a small space. Moments like this, looking closely at these creatures, make me realize that every single second put into this experiment was completely worth it. Even though my camera was already struggling to capture the snails, there were other, even smaller creatures moving all over the place. If you pay close attention to this, you'll see something very similar to a tiny shrimp. In fact, many of them were hiding among the plants I had added. Other creatures of a similar size had no identifiable shape to me at all, and that's when I managed to spot what looked like a species of transparent worm. As thin as a thread, all of these beings are incredibly elusive, and there are hundreds of them living in here. Floating on the surface, there was something that seemed to belong to the plant kingdom, harboring a vast amount of hidden life. All this microscopic activity is part of the zooplankton, tiny creatures that play a vital role in the jar. They act as the engine of the food chain, transforming invisible nutrients into food for larger creatures and keeping the ecosystem perfectly balanced. An incredible fact is that zooplankton undergoes the largest migration on the planet, rising en masse to the surface every night to feed and sinking back to the bottom at dawn to hide from predators. I left the jar tucked away and practically forgotten for 3 months, but making sure it got constant light so the ecosystem could develop and evolve on its own. And finally, it worked. What is just a second of video for you was 3 whole months for this tiny world, where the marine plants have grown incredibly fast, making the jar look completely different. Suddenly, I stumbled upon an incredible surprise. A tiny crab that wasn't there before, meaning it had been born right inside the jar. On top of that, there were now many more snails and hermit crabs than at the start, proving that this tiny ecosystem was perfectly capable of supporting an ever-growing population. Moving on to the strawberry anemone, which was looking much more active than before. This creature uses a paralyzing venom to hunt its prey, but it's harmless to humans. The truly incredible thing is how territorial it is, fiercely fighting off other anemones if they get too close to its rock. It's a fascinating creature that reminds us how nature always finds amazing ways to thrive in any corner of the planet. In fact, other new creatures that weren't there before were starting to show themselves, like this sort of marine woodlouse that turned out to be incredibly fast. I wonder with absolute fascination what hidden limits this jar will be capable of reaching if I let it evolve and breathe for much longer. For that very reason, I plan to keep a close eye on it and will definitely return with a new video down the road to unveil the next chapter. Because even though the larger creatures were truly impressive to watch, deep down I found myself far more captivated by that untamed microscopic universe. Tiny beings with infinitely simpler structures, yet guarding an invisible mystery and an otherworldly beauty you don't get to witness every day. Among the tiny worms inhabiting the substrate, I managed to spot a sort of marine centipede that looked every bit like a true predator. It stayed hidden in the very bottom of the jar, a solitary, elusive creature that was incredibly difficult to film, only daring to emerge when the intensity of the lights went down. It moved as if it were searching for something, perhaps a prey lurking in the shadows. And even though it made slow and meticulous movements, you could tell it possessed explosive speed, being much faster than it appeared at first glance. Making these videos and tending to every detail takes a lot of time and hard work to bring them to you. I'd deeply appreciate it if you could leave a like and comment with your thoughts on the creatures you saw today, as that small gesture means the world to me. This ecosystem is still growing and changing as we speak, and I promise to bring you a new video down the road to show you its full evolution in the future. See you in the next chapter.